Well, I have a feeling this is going to be a very juicy episode. So everyone buckle up. Oh.
Hmm.
The one where your humanity is your divinity. Yeah, that is a statement. That's a big statement. And you and I were just feeling into this as we were hopping on to record, like kind of where is this coming from? And it's connected to like the themes that I think we both have been feeling in our own ways over the year. So this is part like annual reflection episode, but also something much deeper that is going to take us back to one of the OG origin stories. And, I think that this is going to be very potent. I'm very excited for whatever adventure we get taken on today.
Yeah. Super, super juicy. It's interesting to me for sure because the idea of your divinity being your humanity has definitely been like for me that was a really big turning point in my
Mm,
spiritual journey and just in my life was like I'd been chasing the spiritual high or the trying to figure out the esoteric who am I and all of this and the practices and the new agey, I don't know what else to call it, all of these kind of spiritual energetic practices, ideas, all of that. And then I had a rock bottom that I hit very beautifully and looked around at my life and I was like, if I'm doing all of this quote unquote spiritual work, why is it not benefiting my human light? Like it was real humbling, like dark, humbling,
mm,
shadowy in it, where it was like I
oof.
have to face the reality of the fact that what I think I'm doing in terms of spiritual work is not facilitating a more contributive, responsible, socially connected, um, useful, purposeful, meaningful life. I was looking around and
Mm,
I was like, all this stuff I think I'm doing isn't really changing my relationships with my parents, the way my finances
mm,
are, the way I feel about myself in the world, what I'm actually able to contribute and produce and create and bring into the world. So that was a really big piece and being like, oh, I have to be a human first and foremost and master that. So it's a super juicy topic for me because of that, because it's just like I know that journey and I know how pivotal that moment was for me, where it's like it's not escaping to some transcendent, magical, otherworldly realm, but like here on this earth, this in this body, this is where it's at. So I'm excited to see where we
mm.
go.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like that this has been a theme for me. I was writing a blog entry this week about everything that's come up for me over the past year. I don't do New Year's resolutions, but I intuit at the end of each Gregorian calendar year, I intuit a new theme for the upcoming Gregorian calendar year. And um, I was reflecting on that. This past year has been the year of the star. And I was like really breaking that down and what that actually means and like looking at how I defined star at the beginning of this year versus what I've actually learned it means for me in this full embodiment. And part of that thread is also this secondary thread of your humanity is your divinity. And what I really realized this year was, wow, I'm a messy human and how glorious. Like this is what I came for is to be in the mess. It's the embodiment, the physicality of all of the elements in this pretty divine, miraculous form. I mean, the fact that we exist is miraculous. That is divine inherently in and of itself. And then you look at how beautiful, what a privilege it is to be alive, period. there is an aspect that, yes, I am a fragment of God essence as a human, and so is the tree that's before me that I'm, meditating under, and so is the cat that I'm feeding every morning, and so is the wood frame of the house that I live in. And you start to just really realize, I mean, I can seriously break it down. I'm just giving a taster, I guess, of how this has become important to me. But the other piece that like really felt true for me in terms of humanness and divinity was I had an activation. It was interesting. I was sitting on the lands in the UK this summer, and I had this huge activation of ancient Greece come through. And I've always been very fascinated by Greece. But I finally felt some energetic thread, like the Melissae, the bee nymphs, the oracles of Delphi came through very clearly and distinctly for me. And I do feel different, like goddess threads. That's how it works for me. But they came through very clearly, and like the land kind of got opened up, and it was like, you're going to be going here like soon. And I was like, okay, great. And I was curious because there's so much obsession in the quote unquote spiritual communities with ancient Egypt. And look, I love ancient Egypt. Don't get me wrong. I mean, all my rings, I've got a scarab, I've got an ankh, I've got an eye. Like I'm super tuned in to the ancient Egypt uh, energies. But there's a part of it that Greece speaks really clearly to me. And I come from a dance lineage of Isadora Duncan work, and she was deeply inspired by ancient Greece and the philosophies and the art and the land and the energy of that. And that's how I move. I dance in Greek tunics, and that type of dance. It's high priestess work, really, truly, if you start watching it and start embodying it. But it's also it's really human. All the movements are very humanistic. And what came through for me is actually, yes, ancient Egypt is older from what we gather than ancient Greece. But to me, when I feel into the thread of ancient Egypt, it feels much more alien. And Greece feels much more human. So it's almost to me as if the humans of Greece saw this like star seed energy and this alien energy in Egypt, and then literally took their gods and goddesses and they made them human like them because they wanted to really embody their own divinity. Does that make sense? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what it feels like though. So I felt this huge activation of Greece and the divine humanness of it and the messiness of it and the gloriousness of it. And gosh, I just feel like it's such a privilege to be such a beautiful, messy human. And I think you hit something really interesting too, is that when you went down the rabbit hole of spirituality and you realized it wasn't actually supporting and benefiting your human, there's a lot of people in the spiritual world who are really excellent at being spiritual, but they're real shit at being humans. And like, I think that for me, this idea of hieros gamos or sacred union, one aspect of it, because it's like a multi-pronged approach, it's wholeness. And when you come into wholeness, can you be spiritual and human at the same time and not have it be separate? That's in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she calls it's anthropos. It's a complete and divine whole being. That's it. So when you embody your divinity and humanity at the same time, you're in alignment, you're in integrity. And that's just it. Okay, the episode's over. Bye. Not as juicy as I thought. That was pretty easy.
Amazing. It's yeah, it really feels like the integrity, the integration of everything is
Mhm.
so important. Um it's it just strikes me that like why would we go on this journey of facing our deepest stuff
Mm.
unless it was actually going to be of some benefit to the way we live
Mm-hmm.
life and the way we feel about life. Um, it just, it's not appealing. Like it's not, it sounds fun at the beginning because you're like, wow, magic and woo and ooh, this is all amazing. It's very seductive. Then like when you get into the real work of like what actual spiritual work is, there's like energetic work, and then there is spiritual work. And I think spiritual work and
Mm.
energetic work get confused a lot of the time. There's energetic
Can you?
work, and then there's energetic work being like, people talking to their spirit guides, um, playing with, I don't know, meditating and astral projecting. There's all of these things that get conflated with being spiritual work.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is energetic work. That's working with the multidimensional
Mm.
self. That's working with, what else is available through human potential, blah, blah, blah. Spiritual work, my understanding is that it's personal development in the realm of spirit. Like it is
Mm.
cultivating your spirit, cultivating your
Ooh.
command of your spiritual self, which is the self mastery. So I like,
Mm.
for me, like even in my work, I'm like, there's mysticism, but there also has to be personal development. You can't just go chasing the unseen without becoming the person who can hold that, who can hold life. And there's a lot of, I think, denial of the human self and the ability to hold all of that because it's become very seductive, very alluring
Mm.
to, play with oracle cards or whatever it is we're doing. And that's fine, that's fun, but it's not going to change your life without the cultivation of the command of your spirit
Mm.
in the process as well, which I think is where the real work kicks in. That's where we really have to start facing ourselves and, looking at the parts of ourselves that we don't like very much, you know, having to do the real, right? It's like
Right.
it's not fun at that point. It's not comfortable. Um,
Mm.
so cultivating that humanness through it,
Mm-hmm.
and the divinity of that, because we have to hold divinity. We can't just play with it like it's I mean we could, but can
Yeah.
confirm from personal experience, just playing with it left me with a lot of cleanup to do later
Mm.
on. And I don't know that people
Interesting.
often know that or hear about that. And it's something that I tell people about a lot, is that in playing with all of this stuff, thinking I was doing the work or whatever it was, not to say there was no inner work happening, like, because there were other things I was doing, but like it wasn't becoming embodied to a really deep degree. And it wasn't
Hmm.
really going into like the things that needed to be looked at as opposed to the things I thought I wanted to be looking at, if that makes sense.
I think it
Um,
does. I feel like it would be helpful, and you don't, if you don't feel to share, don't, but just like maybe just a little example of what you mean when you were doing spiritual work that wasn't supportive. Like if there's an example of what that means, because like I kind of know what you mean, but I also, I mean, and I've been kind of deep in the game of all of the things for several years now, but I don't even totally know what you mean by that. So I'm just curious, what does that mean?
yeah, let me see if I can try and think of an example. Um, I mean, it's things like going to cacao ceremonies,
Ah,
going to dance, going to like being trained and taught in intuitive and shamanic practices.
gotcha.
Um, like,
Like going through the motions and doing the things that you're supposed to do to be a spiritual person and to connect to the divine is what I'm hearing.
yeah, yeah. So there was
Got
a
it.
lot of a lot of that, going to workshops and trainings and engaging in the things and um, learning to cleanse my own energy or whatever it was. Things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was quite lucky in the fact that I was also in recovery in 12-step program. So that gave
Mm-hmm.
me a foundation actually that I think gives a bit of a different flooring almost for going into other things, because actually my first introduction to anything spirituality was through that. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
through, that wasn't religion. So it was through prayer was really important. Actually connecting to a God of your own understanding was really important. Handing over your will in your life. Like this is, there's something bigger, there's something else that's there, that's present. And then you have to go and clean up the stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you made a mess of. And you have to go through that process. And so that's a beautiful foundation that then but it was happening separately from everything I was doing in energetics and all of this kind of stuff.
Got
Like it
it.
was a different, they weren't integrated and they weren't together. I remember having a conversation with someone at some point where I was like, I don't know how to reconcile the God that I'm
Mm.
praying to in recovery work and the one that I feel in ceremony. And it felt like two different things
Mm.
to me. And it took a long time to kind of reconcile that or understand how that all fit together. But I
Interesting.
was lucky, I think, to have recovery, because it was like that was very practical and very like you need to be brutally honest with yourself. You need to, and that's kind of lingered throughout, even though I went off on this other tangent where I was like, no, I'm going to go and do all the spiritual fun things at the same time. It like at the least I still had this thing, and I sort of rebelled against it and went and did my own thing at the same time. But
Mm-hmm.
later it's always come back where it's like, oh, that actually was really incredibly valuable. And I need to keep coming to life from that perspective of like, that's the stuff where the human becomes capable. That's the stuff where the human becomes able to show up and be present
Mm-hmm.
with life and be able to be here to be in service to other people, to be part of a community, be part of this planet, be part of the groups of people that we're involved in, and actually have a life that feels really useful, which I think
Mm.
is so important. Like I realized I was looking for meaning out there, but actually meaning
Yeah.
really deeply is like, what am I creating with my life, with my human life? What am I doing with this time I have on earth? And I don't know that we ever will feel truly, truly useful purely by playing in the spirit. I
Right.
think we have to have it integrated, right?
Wow. That was really potent. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel that I'm glad you spoke to it there at the end, because that was really it. What I heard was just so much externalization, even in the spirit, like the quote unquote spirit realms, right? Like we've been taught, and this is centuries of having it passed down, that God is outside of ourselves, right? Once we moved away from paganism and we moved towards, um, you know what I'm about to say, but once we moved to Catholicism, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. I know you're a Catholic, but here we are. Dad too. This is the real tea. Um, but like, once we moved away from God being in everything, in the animism of life, and it went through a specific person that you had to talk to and confess to be able to tap into God. Well, then you start removing self from God. It is separate. And then you're always seeking externally outside yourself. And we can even take it further back than that, because the God that is written about in the Old Testament is Yahweh. And Yahweh is a sky God. And as a sky God, well, that's just one aspect of God. And Yahweh is very vindictive and like very like, this um harsh. Yahweh feels harsh, Yahweh is not a loving, nurturing God. And also you realize that, and I'm not a scholar here, so I'm not trying to be an expert in this, but there is proof that the goddess, Yahweh's like wife, the Shekinah, was like taken out entirely, from the equation. So we only got a fraction of God, not God in union with the goddess to balance things out. So where is this rabbit hole leading me? I guess it's still looking externally to ourselves ultimately. And that's really the issue is you realize at a certain point you can do all the things that quote unquote make you spiritual. You can go to church, you can pray, you can go to ecstatic dance, you can go to the temple nights and do your neo tantra, and you can do whatever it is to be in communion with divine. But ultimately, it's about forget actually what it is. It's forgiving yourself for being a messy human and existing, and then also and making peace with that, and also realizing that to forgive yourself, well, who are we taught forgives us? Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, right? It's God is the only being who is capable of forgiving us. But if you can learn to forgive yourself, well, then you actually realize that you too are a fraction of God, essence, right? And to be creative is inherently connected to divinity because God creates, right? So we are inherently divine merely because we create.
Mm,
It's it's actually really, really, really simple, you know? It doesn't have to be overly complicated.
yeah.
But
It's
we
so
create, we
easy
are therefore
to,
God.
like, I think all that, I don't know, consciousness, the creator, the God, whatever it is that we're calling it, like, I think the purpose is to create. And I think our purpose
Mm-hmm.
is to create. And it's like if you think about that, of this externalization of connection to God, like how easy is it then to get us like almost like trying to consume God,
Mm-hmm.
trying to
Mm.
consume divinity, as opposed to, which then, threads into like the commercialization of it all, and like
Mm.
the um just the way society has become, right? It's just like the consumerist space rather than the creationary space
Mm-hmm.
for us to live from, right? It's just keeping that, it always keeps it outside. And then it's like, oh, it can just, then we don't look for our own creationary potential and what we could bring in and bring through into the world, because it's
Mm-hmm.
kept us in this really cute survival. Just keep going, earn your living
Right.
to be here on planet Earth.
Right. Well, yeah, well, that feels like that is a interesting segue into where did we start hating, really hating on our humanness? Where did this begin? And the beautiful origin story that's come up with that is our very beloved and very hated, and actually I think a really misunderstood. I'm probably going to play devil's advocate with her, but our beloved Eve
Yeah.
in the garden, I actually, yeah, because it really feels like we were pretty good until we realized that we were human and naked and then ashamed. And then then we start feeling shame, and then we start blaming Eve for everything and women. And it's a whole freaking avalanche. It's not just a snowball, it's an avalanche of self-loathing, original sin, the concept of original sin, even in, that's more, I would say that's coming from obviously more traditional, like Catholic doctrine. But even in the Gnostic traditions, there's the idea that humans are lesser than something that is God, outside of yourself, and you're desiring to get to that. And I feel that, you know, for me, I really appreciate Magdalene and the Gospel of Magdalene because she speaks to the anthropos, the whole and complete human. You are
Mm.
100% divine and you are also 100% human. And it's not that you're 200% of everything, it's that they're literally the same. It's that they're literally the same, one and the same, the 100%. Yeah, I'm curious what your take is on the self-loathing and the Eve story and all of that as we dive in.
Sorry, clearing my throat there. Yeah, it's I earlier this year I was listening to Adyashanti's book, The Core Wound of Unworthiness. And he talks about
Hmm.
this story as being incredibly influential in this like multi-generational, incredibly widespread sense of unworthiness, essentially, as like the biblical story of Eve being of Adam and Eve, essentially
Hmm.
being the root of a lot of this core identification of being unworthy and sinful and broken and flawed or fallen and whatever it is. He was saying like of all the people he's worked with, it's something like 98% of humanity have this wound, this deep wound of unworthiness, of not
Hmm.
feeling worthy. Oh, sorry. It's gonna be a croaky one. And that it runs through so deep because we're taught that we're flawed. And so we need to spend the rest of our lives proving ourselves. Right.
Hmm.
And so what do we do in order to prove? Will we do anything other than be ourselves? Right. We do anything other than accept who we are and the beauty of who we are and the wholeness of who we are. It's like we think there's something missing. And it traces through absolutely everyone and everything. And actually, I think other religions have other like versions of this, but it's incredibly present in the sort of um Abrahamic religions, but particularly the roots of Christianity and Catholicism and all of that. So it's just this I loved his take on it because he was like the only we do all of this work to try
Hmm.
and overcome it. We try to find our worthiness in all these different ways. We try to prove our worthiness and we try to have it, be dependent on what we do or what we say or what we own. And the way he was speaking about it was the only thing that can truly heal that is transcendent love,
Hmm.
divine unconditional love. And how people access that is up to them, but there's something that overcomes everything else because it's feeling loved by the divine, by something so transcendent, and knowing that that is true.
Hmm.
um I really like his take on it because it's like then we know we're looking in so many of the wrong places for like, how do
Yeah.
I not feel sinful and unworthy and broken in the world so that I can be whole and human and be here fully rather than
Hmm.
chasing, like redemption through, I don't know, spiritual acts and trying to be, I don't know, a good Christian or trying to, become the best philanthropist in the world or whatever it is. It's like, will we ever feel truly healed and whole through any of those things? No, we have to find it within through direct connection to something that is transcendent. It's like so
Hmm.
much bigger than anything um, that we can find by running around and self-proving.
Well, yeah, no, that's a beautiful take. And I'm not super surprised to hear any of that because I don't know, it makes sense. The unworthiness being, something 98% of humanity is like, feeling at any given point. And it's connected to all of these themes. I'm even what's coming through in this moment is even the Egyptian mythology of when you go to you pass on to the other world. Anubis is there to weigh your heart against a feather, and if your heart is as light as the feather, then you can go into the good part of the underworld, and if not, then you go into the bad part. And I can't remember the names for those parts at this moment, but there is a piece of it that I feel like it's bigger than just Christianity. It feels like a very human concept that we want to go to a good place in the afterlife. So let's be devout. And this is getting back to even what you said, like, let's do the things that put me in a good place in the grace of God so that I can pass on to the next realm as being a good person because I did the things that society says is good and worthy of being given a certain level of access to God because I did them. But what I'm left with when I feel into that energy is the vapidness of it, of the emptiness of it, right? It's just shell existence of doing things because you're told you must do them to be good, right? And I could feel that even like that feels particularly true in more like Judeo-Christian values and energies, because when I feel into even just like the Egyptian essence, there's a part of it that it's like, well, did you live a full existence? Right? It's not about just doing the things. Did you live a full existence? So to me, there's a part of it that living in more animistic and like pagan traditions where you really feel the energy and qualities of God essence in the nature around you, you actually learn to commune with them more, which means that you're actually in it. You're in the muck and in the mess. You're getting sunburned. You're getting dirt under your fingernails. Like, you're being whipped about by the waters. And I don't know, there's a part of it for me that it's more about, again, with what you're speaking to, it's the embodiment. It's really the embodiment. To be
Mm.
embodied is to be in your body. And we're so obsessed with escaping our bodies. It doesn't, whether it's, going through the spiritual like to-dos, or whether it's binge watching on Netflix or overeating or being like obsessed with being hypersexual. It doesn't matter what you're filling the void with. You're actually trying, not you specifically, Jess, sorry. What we are all trying to do is like escape our bodies. Everybody's trying to escape. And actually the answer lies in you are safe in your body. And your body is what is going to give you the experience to feel, which is to me why we're here. Otherwise, we're just spirit, free floating around in the ethers. Spirit doesn't necessarily feel. Spirit wants to be in physical form to feel, you know,
Mm.
even as a mushroom. I learned about a type of mushroom that when you cut it, it bleeds. Like it looks like it's bleeding. Like there, when you think that just because we're humans, we're the only like real sentient beings that feel things. No, that's just not true. Spirit desires to feel. Even
Mm.
in the practice of yoga, they're all named after natural things. Like, here's tortoise pose, and here's tree pose, and here's, it's based on that. So you can learn what it feels like to be different aspects of nature and meditate on that and realize that you can be embodied in that in a certain way. Um, but we're always trying to escape and be something separate than what we really are, right?
Yeah. Completely. It's really interesting what you're saying there about, like in pagan times when people were working with the earth, when they were, connected just in their lives, just doing their things. Um, the what struck me when you're speaking about that, and then this escapism from the body, is
Mm,
what has changed is that the magic was living in the
mm,
earth, right? You're saying like spirit was in nature. And what has changed is that the myths of that time were about why, and we touched on this in a different episode, but it was like, this the the river is here because of this reason, and this goddess brought this to the land, and this, like Thor and the thunder, like it was within the
mm.
realm of nature that the stories and the myths existed.
Hmm.
And if we look at, it'd be interesting to figure out when this happened, but and it's actually, it struck me when you're speaking about ancient Greece too, was like the stories of the gods and goddesses were about interacting with the human beings. It was within the setting of a human life, right? It was within the setting of a human experience. But if we look at particularly in our like Christianic type lineage religions, our stories are like they got switched to be, as you're saying, like all about the afterlife. Like it's about something else. It's not about here and now and having a human experience. The
Right.
magic is not in our human experience anymore. The magic is later if you behave yourself now.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like you don't get to have the magic here, but my understanding of Yeshua and the stories that have been written of Jesus is like he was accessing some pretty powerful stuff, to put it
You think?
mildly.
Just like a little bit dabbling.
Just a little miracle here and there, all of this. And through looking into it and understanding it, it's like trusting that that was an example of what could be embodied, what could
Mm,
be held, what could be held in a human body. And if we keep putting the magic somewhere else, we're going to keep looking for it somewhere else. Right. And it's like, I
yeah.
feel like that's deeply what's changed is like our stories are no longer about the magic of being a human or the
It's
potential that
so
is available there.
it's so magical to be a human. I mean, think about the miracle of, again, of your existence, of your life. Like the fact that the human body does what it does without you having to think about it is wild, is absolutely wild. And we don't even totally know why it does what it does. I mean, I was diagnosed with celiac disease like, I don't know, 13 years ago, which I don't identify as that anymore. And that's maybe a separate conversation. But the reality is, like, celiac disease is part of autoimmune disease disorders. It's like lumped into that category. Well, they're all autoimmune diseases. People don't really know why you get them. They're just like they get put into autoimmune because they're like, huh, yeah, we don't know why that's developed. So it's an autoimmune disease. And it's like, it's actually, most of them are proven at this point. I think it's like even close to 80% emotional distress. And
Gabor
fascinating.
Mate Gabor Mate speaks about autoimmune disease specifically. He
Mm,
said 80% of people who come down with who have autoimmune conditions are
hmm.
women. And he
Oh.
said he did studies on this, everyone who comes down with autoimmune conditions has four characteristics in common. That is that they believe they are responsible for other people's feelings. They are self-sacrificing, Let me get my notes. I literally wrote this down because
Well,
I was
so
like,
far
that's
it's
interesting.
not relatable at all to me. I can't relate to those first two.
I
Oh,
don't,
okay. It's just holding up a mirror to me. Thanks, Jess.
if I can find it quick enough, I'll find it. But if not, then I'm just gonna go over it. But I wrote them down literally somewhere and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
No, I can't find them fast enough. Never mind. But anyway, there were these four characteristics, and it's all to do with believing you're responsible for somebody else, prioritizing other people's needs over your own,
Mm-hmm.
um, not being able to be in touch with what you need in your body,
Mm.
and things like this. So it's essentially the self-sacrificing, the martyr, the overgiver,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, the archetype there that
Interesting.
comes down with that. So I thought that was really interesting. It's like, oh, yes.
Well, but that's also but this is also really beautiful. So we've spoken to, uh, and we will continue to speak to symbolism throughout everything because it's part of the storytelling narrative of being in communion with spirit because spirit speaks through symbols. Spirit doesn't speak in like, and God said this with like in the English language, like it doesn't really work like that with spirit. When I say that I get messages from spirit, I've had some friends or family members be like, what does that mean? They're like very curious. They're like, oh, Hannah's hearing voices. And I'm like, it's not really a voice, like that's not how sometimes it comes through in specific words, but it's usually in images. And so um the body the body holds so much symbolism of what is going on at any given moment in our lives. Most of us, though, are so deeply disconnected from our bodies, we're not listening to what it's actually about. And, this is the whole basis of Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, is it's like somatic work is God's work, is you realizing where your traumas lie as a human if you're paying enough attention. So our whole experience of life is literally because we're in a body and because we feel, and our body is so intelligent. It knows exactly why it's doing it at any given moment. But are you listening to the God essence of symbol as to why? So, for instance, as an example, with the celiac disease, right? It's based in the gut. Okay, so I'm having difficulty on a very like, you know, uh, prescribed level. I'm having difficulty processing wheat and gluten, right? Like my body can't break down that protein. But growing up, there was a lot of anger and fighting in the house, and I'm the eldest girl in my family, and there's a lot of psychology around that. And I did my best to make sure that I was always behaving really, really well because my subconscious belief system was that if I behaved well and I didn't get into trouble and nobody yelled at me, that there would be more peace in the house. Right. And so I did everything I could. I grew up as a super perfectionistic, like super type A, like, I mean, my poor little brother would say at times, he's like, Hannah, it was really hard to be born after you because you were good at everything. And I was like, I know I am good at everything. I'm not at this point. I've explored the being bad at things, but at the time it was like I had to be good at everything because that would actually keep peace in the house. That was, maybe a false belief system, but it was a belief system nonetheless that I experienced. And all the pain and anxiety and stress that I felt with having to be in control of all that was stored in my gut. I was so sick to my stomach most days growing up until I left and I went to university. I couldn't eat breakfast for most of my young life. I felt literally unwell. Sometimes I would purge, like I was sick constantly. And of course, I developed celiac disease, right? So you think about that. It's like all of the stomach was like, I'm not able to break down all of the feelings that I'm experiencing, and I'm struggling with that. And that's what the body's telling me. That's what God is telling me. I need support in the fire. is also related. Fire is always connected to alchemy, but it's connected to anger. I remember when I started this spiritual awakening journey several years ago, I was getting some body work done from my mentor. And she's literally like, ooh, you have a lot of anger in the body. And I go, no, I don't. What are you talking about? Absolutely not. I'm not an angry person. I never get angry. And she's like, okay. And then fast forward through, like 7 years of work, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I definitely have some rage issues. 2023 was the year of the dragon. Girl got shingles. I called them my dragon scales. I was just like purging right and left,
Mm.
all the fires, internally. So, yeah, the body, the point of that whole little anecdote, I believe, is really just, are you listening to what the body is telling you? Because your body is gloriously divine. It is always talking to you.
It really is. Yeah.
Phew.
I almost feel like I want to say for anyone listening that this does not mean we are against science and the medical industry. Just to be clear,
No,
because
there's a space for that.
yeah, no, it's like speaking to being integrated, right? It's just like wanting to say there are more ways of looking at these things, and our bodies are incredibly
Yes,
intelligent. And the thing is that like I'm not against having medical treatment for things. I think it's genius.
of
And
course.
there is a level of intelligence that is living and alive within our body and our being that we've been taught to not remember how to connect with. There's
Yes.
a mistrust in the body that has
Mhm.
been deeply, deeply perpetuated and reinforced. It's like we don't trust what our body is doing
Right.
so much of the time. Like the standard is we don't trust what the body is doing.
Mhm.
It's been taught so much, and it's like, for whether it's for women around our cycles, whether it's for, illnesses that we have, it's like the same in the religious context. Oh, we made God an external thing that we need a middleman for. We also made health an external thing that we need a middleman for, and an industry to tell us what's wrong. That doesn't mean we don't need those people. It doesn't mean we don't need those avenues. What it means is that, like, and I think this is really bringing it into like, what does it mean to be divinely human? Really, really, truly, is the power lies within you first. When we're relying entirely on these industries and these people that are outside of ourselves, we're giving up all our power to that and
Mhm.
inviting in external information that we haven't even like run through our own channel to check or see. We genuinely assume we don't know what's going on in our bodies. Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Well, what does it feel like? Because
Right.
intuitively, you'll know, should you be worrying about this or not?
Yeah.
Like, is this a moment to go and see a doctor right now? Or can you feel in your body and go drink some like ginger tea? Because that's what your body is telling you to do. We've
Right.
really lost trust and faith in the wisdom and the intelligence of the body and the system. And it's like the prevalence of making disease such a big thing that is so for profit. Like if we
Mhm.
really want to get into like the capitalization and commercialization of the medical industry, I don't think we need to not have the medical industry. I greatly appreciate medicines and
Oh,
medication,
wait.
surgeons, and the beautiful, wonderful things they can do. I think it's
Yes.
incredible. And I think there's room to question. I think there
Hmm.
is room to come outside of that because we've just put all of our, yeah, we've turned it into this massive like commercial project where disease is like, oh, it's a thing. And so it's like bad. This is bad and wrong. Whereas I believe
Mm-hmm.
once upon a time, I keep telling people, I'm like, when you have a cold, what your body is doing is clearing itself of the bacteria. When you have a fever, what the body is doing is an intelligent response to clean itself through.
Right.
But we like to get rid of those symptoms because they're, not nice, not pleasant, not whatever. It's like, oh, it's sick and wrong, bad. Let's make it go away.
Right. Well, but that again, though, that's connected to, and that's brilliant. It's this brilliant like microcosm. What we're doing when the healthcare system is what we're still doing with God, is externalizing, that something outside of ourselves, someone outside of ourselves knows better than we do and is going to give us all the answers. And is going to take us to the promised land of health and well-being, you know? And yes, at the end of the day, Western medicine exists for a reason. Thank goddess. Every once in a while, I need an ibuprofen, to like help me get through a massive headache because I just cannot sit through whatever I am purging through my crown through the headache. And I can't be bothered to deal with that on that day. But that's the whole, for me, the Western medicine was always meant as a short-term solution. It's not meant for long-term solutions, right? It's just
Mm.
band-aids. So that's what we've done is we've glorified the band-aid solution, which is just not that. At the end of the day, though, we get to reclaim the body's wisdom and intelligence and trusting ourselves with that. So yeah, wow, it's it's really vital to be in your body and to be okay. Like our physical body is the actual representation of Earth, right? Something that is tangible that you can touch. And and so that if you come back to this elementalism, this really like let's bring it back to I am all elements at one, right? You come back to your human nature. Well, human, and I believe I spoke to this at some point, human stems, the root word is humus from Latin, which means of the earth. And then nature stems from an ancient Egyptian word, which is the neteru. The neteru were the gods and goddesses. So you are of the earth and you are also divine. And so,
Mm.
this is our beautiful alchemical embodied all elements in one, and if you can make peace with that and really be aware of it, then you can be in the awe and the wonder and the splendor of your own miraculous existence. And yes, we need help sometimes to get there. We need someone else who knows more than us, has studied it for years to tell us. But actually, what's so fascinating is that what comes up is I have a dear sister, a dear friend who I met about a year and a half ago. Um, she was diagnosed with very advanced cancer a while back, about a year and a half ago, actually, right after I met her. And she went to the doctor. She lives in the US. She went to the doctors, and the doctor literally was like, you have about 6 months to live. Like told her that. And my friend, believing in herself and not in the diagnosis and not giving her power up to that, she healed so like all of the cancer out of her body. Now, did she do chemo and like she did all of the things? So thank goodness for Western medicine to support her with that. It was both though. She did the self-development
Mm.
and she did the Western medicine and she did holistic practices and she went deep into the shadow of what was coming up for her in her body. And every time she showed up to be checked, the doctor was like, I can't believe it, but the cancer is completely gone. It's not even in remission, it's gone from your body. And literally every time told her, you're a miracle, but also was like, you're an anomaly. This never happens. And didn't would always kind of like shame her for having healed herself. It was really weird. So, this is a beautiful example of where you get to move through the world in questioning everything, which, by the way, to be human is
Mm.
to question. To be human is we have a human brain which has us think about things. Well, it's like, all right, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Sense. think about that word, when we sense something, right? Like, what are the sensations of something? It doesn't feel right. It also doesn't like something doesn't feel right in that. And my brain is able to catch on to that because the body's already telling me that, and it's sending all of these messages to the brain to think about it. And we have a rational, logical brain to process it. So it's this interesting weave to be in, to doubt. We must question everything. We must question, I mean, the very existence of God, even. You know what I mean? Like it gets to be all of it. But there's something so beautiful if you allow yourself to be human and be like, wow, I get. How lucky am I that I'm a human being, that I get to doubt the existence of my divinity? Oh, I get to question that too, and then come back full circle to be like, wow, the fact that I can do that is itself paradoxically divine. All right,
Mm,
beautiful.
yeah. I think I love that so much. It's just to be able to question. I have a lot of long conversations with my mum about questioning things because I'm just like, oh, well, if the
Mm-hmm.
doctor said that, yeah, but what about this? Or what about this? And she's like, it wouldn't even cross my mind to be questioning these things. There's a lot of people on the planet who haven't been
Mm-hmm.
taught question everything because there may be an alternative, there may be something else, there may be other things you can do. And, I love the way you're sharing the story about your friend being able to heal all of that because of multiple layers of approach, a holistic approach to it.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And it's like, sorry, I'm just trying to order my thoughts here.
I know that's
the
how I feel too.
It's just such a juicy topic, it's because in my work, what I realized in developing the work that I do, what I realized was that like energy work needed to hit not just the energy, it needed to hit the mind, the body, the emotions, and the energy all at the same time in
Mm.
order for a transformation to occur. So it had to take place in every aspect of the being, right? It had to
Mm-hmm.
take place at every layer in order for it to change and last and actually be something that would become embodied, lasting, permanent, sustainable. So what I see a lot in the world is either the denial of the human or there's the
Mm-hmm.
denial of the divinity. And
Mm.
in order for us to be whole, complete, powerful, full of power, we have to have both. We have to have the spirit in the body, right? And Carolyn Mace, love Carolyn Mace, super
Love.
obsessed with red light, right? Everything. But a lot of her work made a lot of sense to me. And she speaks a lot about, what I was saying earlier is being able to command the spirit, being able to command the soul of the self and your own energy, your own life force in order to be able to heal.
Mm.
Like that's the divinity. If you want to heal your body, this is how miracles happen. This is how the magic of what we can cultivate or change or heal or shift in the body is like we need that ability to command the divinity within to be powerful enough
Mm-hmm.
that it can do that level that we can do that level of healing within and on ourselves. But it's when we get into all of this like separation of all of these pieces that
Mm-hmm.
like we're not in coherence with ourselves. We're not in this space of like I can command and be in divinity. Like if we just think about divinity, like what are we imagining? Like or the la 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 sparkly high vibey things. It's like, well, no, what is our divinity? What is it? Like it's the power of source, of life force, the fabric of reality
Mm-hmm.
that makes up reality is this thing that makes up every single thing that is within us. The thing that when you split the atom, all of this energy is released, right? Something as
Right.
tiny and innocuous as a little atom, you split that and it
Yeah.
goes, ugh, all of this energy comes flying out of the place, right? Nuclear energy. Is that what us humans call it?
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
it
I think.
becomes
I don't
this
know. I
giant,
think.
like this incredible amounts of energy contained in
Hmm.
everything that is, consciousness that is alive. And it's like, what is our divinity? Well, that's our divinity, our access to that
Right.
within our body, but we have to be in the body to be able to hold it, command it, work with it. But if we're splitting it off out into like, oh well, I'll deal with like the mental part of this. I'll deal with the emotional part of this. I'll deal with the
Mm-hmm.
physical illness part of whatever this is, or the dis-ease or discomfort or whatever it is we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But deny access to levels of that power that created like the nuclear explosion that was literally from splitting an atom. Like that's a lot of power.
Well,
That's a lot of power, right? And it's like it can be
yeah.
taken for negative purposes, or we can be aware that that's the stuff that we are made of.
Right.
And how do we begin to unleash that level of power within the body, within the being, and hold that
Well,
here? And what can we do?
that is really what I think, ooh, it's like that's what this is really about. To be able to hold our divinity and reclaim it, it's actually the most uncomfortable thing. It's way easier. It's way easier and much more physically comfortable to access numbness, numbness, than to access your power. That's why most people avoid grief. They avoid anger. They avoid pleasure, like true, like joy. And after experiencing so much of this roller coaster of experiencing everything as a deeply feeling human woman, like, oh my God, like to feel anger course through my body, rage, like pure rage, deeply uncomfortable. But do you know what's more uncomfortable than even rage or even grief? It's bliss. I was going to say joy, but it's bliss. To experience ecstasy and lightness in the body, I want to explode from my body, right? Like that's the orgasmic nature of existence. That's the aliveness. That's why I think we've put so much emphasis on the human orgasm because it's, that's how most people have access to orgasmic energy, which is really that new it's the atom being split kind of energy. It's that level of climax. But ultimately, once you start actually tapping into source energy, you start tapping into your bliss frequency more regularly. You start tapping into Christ consciousness, which is open heartedness, right? Much more easily. You actually start realizing that you can live like the walking embodied orgasm that you were always meant to be. And I don't mean that in like a very neo-tantric way, like I'm the orgasm baby. I'm not. Which sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm hot shit. Like that, yes, it's usually around my ovulation period, ovulation cycle. But there's a part of, but like it's much more rich and deeper than that. It's deeply sensual. That like it's really like, wow. Look, like I'm smelling this flower and I am just filled with so much joy and pleasure and aliveness at this scent. And like, I'm a deeply orgasmic woman because I can access my bliss, because I've allowed and I've expanded the plasticity and the allowance of pleasure and bliss in the body, of ecstasy in the body. And we really, I would say, especially as women, have been taught to disallow ourselves to access the pleasure point. But I think it's really, truly everyone. I mean,
Just in
men
society in
too.
general, though, it's like
Yeah,
people forget that like accessing higher levels of pleasure and bliss and everything else requires deep levels of safety,
right.
deep foundations of safety in the body. And most of the planet are not operating in that.
Well, what's interesting as we're speaking to this, what comes up is what you spoke to earlier, right? Where like we have to now is the punishment and the bliss comes in the afterlife. Well, there's a part of
Yeah.
it that I feel like, yes, we've moved into more like we've moved from uh religion or spirituality into more secularism. And but at the same time, the remnants of you must suffer in this life, that's remained. That the suffering isn't optional, but actually, suffering is always optional, right? One of my favorite
Mm,
phrases that's come through in the past few years is pain is inevitable, suffering is
yeah.
optional.
I wanted to also
What?
say like that's the distinction there, right? Is like
Yeah,
I think people get tripped up on the language of all of this stuff a lot. Is like bliss sounds really nice and lovely and woo amazing. And, then the idea that we don't have to suffer also sounds really great. Because like suffering is very different from feeling pain, right? Like
totally.
my experience of expanding capacity for joy, for bliss, for divinity. I find the word divinity quite funny because I used to associate it with like the light, sparkly,
Mm,
like all of this. So more and more I use the word power
mm.
because it is that big, it is that uncomfortable, and we've been taught to see power in a particular way. But anyway, that's a whole other friggin' episode about power and the corruption of that. But the more power that we can hold in the body, and my experience around that is like it's it's not sparkly, it's not light, it's not going to, and I think the language of light and dark trip us up a lot of the time as well. It's like it's
Hmm.
not going to feel good all the time. Like bliss is not like, oh, I
Hmm.
reached this state, it's going to feel magical. It's like, no, it's like what are the depths of discomfort that you can sit with and be okay with and not trying to escape from or wiggle out of or distract yourself from. The more capacity for bliss, the more capacity for pleasure, the more capacity for joy, and that orgasmic experience of reality is not that life becomes this orgasmic magical thing. It's that the way it is experienced and allowed to be in the body
Hmm.
is like even in the depths of like what feels like pain moving through the body, when it's like deep grief or like you're saying anger or whatever it is, it's like it's not that it feels good, it's in the allowing. It's like when we get into
Right.
that place where the body starts to move beyond the experience of I like this, I don't like this,
Hmm.
this is good, this is bad. It's like my experience of this has been much more moving into this just is.
Right.
It might feel good, it might not feel good, but it just is. And the
Mm.
allowing of that into the body, and it's like this just is, and I'm with it fully, wholeheartedly, in every aspect of my being, and allowing this level of energy and power and whatever flavor on the spectrum it is like the powerful intensity of it is allowed to move through my body. So I think part of it really is like how much can we allow for intensity in the body
Hmm.
without making
Yeah.
it dramatic, with over dramatizing it, or without latching on to everything needing to feel that way. It's like, why do we
Right.
allow for the intensity? Well, because there's a piece underneath that is the real thing. The intensity is just moving through the body. The core of the
Yeah.
being is like the stillness. And it's like, I can allow my body to be
Mm.
in the intensity when there's this really deep stillness within that is this underlying piece that is there regardless of what's going on in mind and in the
Yeah.
emotions in the things. Anyway.
Mm. Yeah, as you were speaking, it came through like this, like what is the quintessential human experience of divinity and pain and orgasm and life and death and aliveness all at once? And I was like, giving birth. And I say that as a woman who's not given physical birth on this planet yet, maybe ever. I don't know where that gets to stand for me at some point. But the idea that a woman can create, can procreate, and needs a man to do that, you know? So it's she can't, although there is a whole movement of spontaneous immaculate conception births, but we won't get into that right now. That's magical stuff from other versions of reality. Anyways, but in general, in this life that we live now on this planet, we need a man and a woman to have a baby, to grow life within. And then one of the most traumatic experiences for the physical body is birth. And it's, and a lot of women, I mean, and thank goodness for modern medicine, because it's allowed for women to stay alive through childbearing, right? Because it's actually a very dangerous thing to give birth. It's become less dangerous because of Western medicine. So thank you for that, right? All of that. And so you're at the crux of life, of death, and then deep pain, incredible pain. But there are women who speak about orgasmic births, right? And so there's this
Yeah.
whole concept of the power, and I've heard so many stories of, like men who are like holding the hand of their woman as she's given birth and are like, oh my God, I had no idea she was that strong on like physical levels, emotional levels, like mental levels. That was wild, and there is that kind of to be able to experience that, right? And that's not to say you have to be a physical mother on this planet to experience that. That's I think the embodied version of like that specific thing that is tangible, right? But it is that same level of energy that courses through all of us, regardless of what we're giving birth to, whether that's a feeling or a project or like whatever. It's that level of power that runs through every single one of us, and that's what's scary because it's so powerful. Like even it,
Mm.
like I've played with that word power, and it's like her is like in there, which is the goddess, right? The physicality of the strength of nature itself,
Mm.
of nature itself. Like I have a friend, I have a brother who speaks to, he's like, the most treacherous journey is the one that we take from head to heart, which is the embodied journey,
Yeah.
to really live in the heart space, to be so willing to crack open to essence, to source, to power, to love, to whatever, to feeling, whatever the feeling is. That is really challenging. It's really challenging to live in that kind of embodied space. But how beautiful, what a
Yeah.
gift. We get to do that. How lucky are we that we were born as humans to experience all of it and be able to process it and think about it and do something about it. Wow, that's a gift to be of
Mm.
service
It is.
with our
We've been,
existence.
what was just dropping in there as you were speaking about power and birth and like those moments, right? Like really where everything comes together, like the edges of life and death and pain and
Mm.
bliss and all of these things. What I have found to be true is that, and this is on the topic of suffering as well, is like, I think we've gone to this point where we were so sick of the religious narratives that life should be suffering and all of this that we've kind of gone the other way. And we've decided that
Mm.
life should be pain free. And there is a deep, and I believe we shouldn't have to suffer, right? But this has gone baby out with the bathwater. Like, it's like less and less and less pain. If we look around and I understand that like I'm in a particularly privileged position in how I grew up and who I am and all of that sort of thing. I understand that. So I'm speaking to this in the perspective of those who are in places of, comfort and privilege in life where it's like, yeah, there's more comfort that is there. It's gotten to this place where we are so happy to stay comfortable that like we
Hmm.
don't seek out those moments of pain and intensity. We look at like there's people on the extremes of this, like if you know David Goggins, who
No.
I think he was, I don't know if he was military or marine or whatever he was, but
Oh,
he's like super
yeah.
hardcore, is like always running, he's like up at 2 in the morning and like, doing these
I think
really
he was
high
a
intensity things.
Navy SEAL. I think he was
Navy
a Navy
SEAL,
SEAL.
yeah.
Yeah.
So really, really just that level of discipline and pushing to the edge of what the
Yeah.
human body is capable of and what's the capacity. And like that's an extreme level of it. But there is something in discovering where our capability and our capacity lie through seeking
Yeah.
out difficulty. Because like this is going to sound incredibly uh dramatic, but my belief is that um humans are resilient and adaptable and capable and extremely powerful, and we can hold extreme levels of power. And one of the things that really hit my heart when I was younger was seeing, not even that much younger, I don't even know if that was this long ago, but some years ago, I would see, it was early days of recovery, I think it was, okay, so maybe a decade ago. Anyway, I would see stories of children, young children in the middle of the war zone in Syria,
Hmm.
with their taking their little baby brother or sister and trying to find breadcrumbs amongst the rubble. And they would
Hmm.
find young children who'd like lost their parents, they're in the middle of a war zone, and they would find ways to feed themselves at like, 7 years old and their 2 year old brother or sister. They would find ways to survive. And I would look at this and it just hit me so deeply. And it was like this pleasure seeking, pain avoidance
Hmm.
life that we've been ingrained into, where it's like, I want to be comfortable. I want to be just in the, this is what we're talking about when we talk about comfort zone. It's not just like, oh, nicey nice, like, oh, I'm just, not stretching myself far enough. It's like, no, there is a zone of comfort where you are not stretching your levels of difficulty, but you're also not stretching your levels of pleasure and enjoyment and capacity for
Yeah.
the good things in life either. It's like you
Hmm.
will find out what you're made of in difficult times. And actually, we sit around telling ourselves, oh, I couldn't do that, or I know I'm really scared I'm going to get judged by someone, or oh, wait, that feels, I'm scared of doing this thing. It's like, yes, we're allowed to have those things. We are allowed to experience those fears. We are allowed to work through those things. And I think there is great amounts of discovery of what power we actually hold when we're put in really, really challenging situations. But it's like, do we need crisis to make that happen? Or can we choose it? Right? Like David Goggins. It's like you don't need
Hmm.
crisis. You can choose it. You can choose your hero's journey, heroine's journey, right? Choose to go on that adventure, go bigger and discover what you're made of, discover what's within you that you can feel proud of and feel confident in and feel alive within. Like we have incredible
Hmm.
resources within us. Like if we look at the incredible stories from like the hurricane in the US, Helene, like the people that came together and coming together and looking after one another and pooling resources and stepping up in like crazy dire situations.
Hmm.
And just incredible to see who pitches in and who, everyone steps in as community, and that there's so much power that's in that. But I think
Hmm.
we're living in this illusory time that is like, you don't have to be powerful. Wait for a crisis to do that. It's like, do we need a
Well,
crisis?
it's so there are two things that come up for me with that. Well, there's a lot. Well, that's probably more than two, but maybe I'll only touch on two. My brain's going, oh my God, so much. First of all, as you're saying crisis, there's a part of it that I heard Christus. And there's a weird part that it's like in moments of crisis, we are tapping into our own resilient Christ essence to find our own power. So I've never heard it that way, but as you were speaking, I was like, right, but it's
Mm,
really that because Christ consciousness is our embodiment of that power, of that light that we hold within, because it is like lightness. We're not trying to avoid dissension and heaviness, right? That's not the point. And I think a lot of over the years, that's been lost in religious context. It's the emphasis on the ascension. Yes, we want to feel the lightness, but we can only feel lightness because of the duality of the density that we also get to embody. So, anyways, because we have that, we can feel it. Anyway, so that's a really interesting thing that came through is like the Christus of learning who we really are, what we're really made of. And the other piece that comes through is what wants to be spoken to in this moment. Yeah. You mentioned the hero's journey and the obstacles, right? The trials, the tribulations. In any great story, every great story, there are trials that the hero or heroine must face to be able to come out of it on the other side transformed. If you have a story about a person that sits on their ass all day and watches TV and goes to work and drinks with their friends and goes to sleep and doesn't get a good night's sleep, but loves their cat and everything's fine, it's a boring story. And if that's your life, I'm not judging you for that. If you're happy with that, truly happy with that, there are some beings that like that's meant to be your life and that's great. Like, fine, that's what you're meant to learn in this lifetime. Phenomenal. But if you at all feel bored with your life being that level and you look to other stories and wish that other people's stories were your own, but you don't feel that you could do it, you, my friend, are not living your heroic life. And your heroic life is your human life.
yeah.
We are meant to be challenged, right? Like the god Ganesh is coming through. He's the god of like overcoming obstacles. He's not of obliterating obstacles so we don't have it. It's to give us the power, to remind us of the power and the strength to tap into source to help us move through the obstacle with grace, with joy, with play, with ease, because that's the truth is we get to move through challenges with grace and joy and play and ease. I've been speaking to a brother recently because it's gotten to a point in my life I'm in just awe. I'm just going to say it, of myself, that I have gotten to a point where I'm experiencing some of the biggest challenges I've actually ever experienced in my life, but it feels so easeful on a very current experience of that. I've been going through some very severe back pain where I've experienced this pain before. It's come up, I've been experiencing it on and off for about 2 years where I can't stand. Even like laying in bed is very challenging for me. It's severe, severe pain. And it came back up out of the blue. I'm going to put that in quotes, out of the blue, because it's never out of the blue. No such thing as coincidence. Just again, spirit speaking to me about something that wants to be seen and spoken to and moved through the body. But like it's come up out of the blue. And has it been incredibly painful? Yes. Physically, very, very painful. I've needed a lot of support. I've had sisters and brothers come to my aid to support me because I haven't been able to do it alone. Like I've needed to ask for help. But there's been something I haven't suffered. And that's the difference. I've actually chosen to still remain light in that. I haven't felt like my whole world was crumbling and woe is me. I'm a victim of this happening because I didn't do this and I didn't do this, or I did this and that brought the pain on, and I'm going to beat myself up for it. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Bring it back to the Catholics and Romans, right? Why not while we're at it? But like, I haven't beat myself up about it. It's not the end of the world. I'll get through it. And after about 5 days of experiencing this severe pain, but not suffering, I'm coming out the other side of pain, right? And so there is a point in the journey that we get to choose. It gets to be easy. We don't have to choose dis-ease every frickin' time. We can choose comfort in the dis-ease, right? Even then, like one of the mantras that I've been working with, and I can't remember who it is. He's brilliant. He's such a bright light. This one beautiful man who works in manifestation. I can't remember his YouTube videos. Anyways, he's brilliant. But he goes, there's no such thing as good or bad. There's only ever good or very good. And that's a really confronting way to live, because it requires you to realize that everything is always happening for you. You have to take yourself out of victim.
Yeah.
And I think we have just overly, we have put the human victim up on a pedestal for
Oh
so
yeah.
long that to remove the pedestal of victimhood, of self-inflicted and externally inflicted victimhood, requires us to become fully self-responsible and sovereign. To be sovereign, like I play with that word too, la reine in French is the queen, which, so what that means is, it doesn't mean that we're all queens. We're all queens, sister. No, like, but you get to access your crown, right? King of King, Lord of Lords, Queen of Queens, like, you get to access your divinity by taking full self-responsibility and removing your victimhood from the equation. And that, for me, in coming back to this whole self-reflection of 2024 for me, I think that's been perhaps, oh yeah, that's perhaps been the biggest lesson, is I have removed the victim from my life. Every once in a while, she wiggles back in and she's like, woe's me, I feel badly. But the reality is, I'm no longer allowed to be victim of my circumstances. I choose my circumstances in every moment. Will I choose suffering, or will I endure the pain and find my way through it because I am resilient and resourceful enough to do so, because I know I'm not powerful?
Mm. I think it's I love that you've spoken to the victim piece and how much we've elevated that and how much we've allowed that in society. And I think it's so important there to touch on, like, when we're in that, we can't see it. We
Mm,
struggle to move out of it. And there are things on this planet that happen that are not okay, that are perpetrated by other people that are not okay.
mm,
And in all of that, and I think this is important to talk about, because this is what happens a lot in the spiritual community, is that we are told, or we're bypassing, we're not addressing the real things. And I think it's really important. I mean, this could be a whole other episode, but like, I'm just going to briefly touch on it here.
mm,
Is like, we get accused of bypassing in this and victim blaming,
mm,
because everything is the languaging around this kind of stuff can get so like, oh, you were like abused in some way, well, take responsibility. And
mm,
it can sound so diminishing of people's experiences, and I get that, I understand that, I know that very, very deeply. And what where I come from in this is, and I know you do too, um is what happens can be not your fault, not of your creation,
Mm-hmm.
And the journey of coming out of victimhood is not about denying that anything terrible ever happened. What it is about is discovering, now, who am I going to choose to become? Like
Mm.
it's this thing happened. This was really hard and painful. And it's about, where can I find within me the power and the gold and the wisdom that can be extracted from that. If a terrible thing was
Mhm.
perpetuated or perpetrated upon me or anybody else, we don't condone that. We don't say that's okay. We don't try and like make it like everything happens for a reason. This is the one that everyone gets pissed
Mm.
off about, right? Is like, it all
Yeah.
happens for a reason. No, it doesn't. No, there's shitty, even evil human beings operating from really dark places on this planet.
Yes.
It doesn't all happen for a reason. It's not all part of God's wonderful plan. I don't believe that it all is. What I do believe is that in the darkest places, I don't need to use that experience as something that is going to give me an excuse to take from the world. I don't need to get from outside of myself. What I need in those moments is to know that I am bigger and more powerful than anything that has happened to me. And I get to extract golden wisdom from that because I deserve that. If something horrible has
Mm.
happened, I deserve to come out the other side of that, having extracted something beautiful from that experience. Somehow, there's
Mm.
something I can take from the darkest places and I can turn it into something that's going to benefit me. And that is what I mean, and I'm pretty sure that's what you mean as well. Like when we're speaking to like finding power and being in those difficult places, does it ever make the bad things okay? No.
Mm.
But I know I deserve to step through that and be like, you know what? I'm taking my power out of that situation. I'm taking
Yeah.
it back within myself. I get to have something good come out of that for me, something that empowers me, something that makes me stronger, right? It's like, I get that. I get
Mm-hmm.
to have that. And I get to choose that for myself. And I get to create that for myself and experience that. I get to heal from that. I get to forgive myself, forgive situations, whatever it is. Doesn't mean I condone it, doesn't mean it's okay. What it does mean is that I get to come out of that stronger, not more broken. At some point, I
Yeah.
get to become out of that stronger, not because it's happened to make me stronger, because that's the divine plan of life. No, shit happened. What am I going to choose to do with it for my benefit, for getting to know how
Oof.
much more power I hold? And that's what we mean by responsibility, is not you are responsible for the shit that happened to you. What it
Yeah.
means is the ability to respond to that in a new way that says, I'm turning this into something that serves me. I'm going to choose to turn it into something that serves my highest, because there is no other option. Otherwise, I collapse under it. If it
Right.
doesn't become my strength, I'm going to collapse under the weight of it. So I
Right.
do get to choose. And I think those are the points that really shift us. It sends a different electromagnetic wave and signal through the body, which creates something new in how we're showing up in life. If you see it in, I think the Gene Keys maps this out really well by Richard Rudd, right? It's like there's the shadow, all 64 shadows, which all of this comes from like a combination of the Kabbalah, astrology, and the I Ching. I Ching, I never know how to pronounce that. But the 64 shadows, as written in the Gene Keys, are the victim frequency. And then
Mm-hmm.
something changes in the biochemistry of the body and what ripples through on an electromagnetic level through the cells that shifts us into the gift
Yeah.
frequency of that. And it's contained within the deepest pain, right? It's
Right.
contained within the deepest, darkest places. And it's like, am I willing to go there and be like, okay, I'm going to feel all of that. And something in that moment is going to get shifted into where it becomes not something external that's happened to me that impacts me, but something that comes within me as a gift and benefit to my life that's going to serve, that's actually going to support me, as opposed to something that I have to battle against or get dragged back by, or whatever the, thing is around that.
Mm.
There's a little bit of a tangent there, but like it
No,
just
no,
felt
no.
key,
That
right,
was
in
powerful.
accessing power. And our divinity is our ability to come into the darkest places and go, I choose this to be my power and not my problem going
Exactly.
forwards.
Girl, I think that that was beautifully said and incredibly poignant and on topic because that's what we are talking about. Yeah, when I'm saying it's only ever good or very good, there's no such thing that a bad thing that happened and like it's self-responsibility, it's your fault. That's not at all what I'm saying. So I appreciate you speaking to
Yeah.
that because it's like it's not about that. It's not about that ever. Like the fallacy of humanity, I think, is that we believe that everything is rational because we can be rational and we like to think of ourselves as very rational. Well, I hate to tell you, but most of the time we're not being rational. I can't tell you how many like moments of myself, but also like speaking to sisters where they're like, why hasn't he called back yet? It doesn't make any sense. I can't rationally explain it. It's because it's not rational. We're talking about emotions and feelings. And it's just like to be human is deeply messy and irrational. And we have to make peace with that, right? And that's a beautiful thing that we get to be so irrational. So there's things that happen in life that are not rational. They make
Yeah.
no logical sense. There are bad things that happen to good people, to people. I'm of the belief system that we're all born good, and whether we allow things to happen or not to us is that's part of the hero and heroine's journey, which is exactly what you're speaking to. Can I go to the deepest source of pain and will I let that win? Will I let that define me? Will I let that break me? And sometimes it does require a full, like a breakage, some form of catharsis before we can transmute that into gold and alchemize it. For something I experienced recently, like in the past year, is I tried my hand at open relating in a relationship. And I never thought I would ever do that. I was like, all right, I live in Bali, the land of expat, neo tantra, polyamoryisms, open relating. I've avoided it for so long. Let's see what happens if I try this. And well, it was also, let me just say this. It was happened during my year of the dragon, which meant rage and jealousy and anger and like deep ugliness, like the ugliest
Mm.
parts of myself. And, to be bless this man who I experienced this with. It was, and when I say that I experienced it with him, I'm talking about like 3 weeks. Like it lasted, it was quick. I got the lesson fast. But bless this man who invited me into exploring my deepest pains emotionally, right? And I'm talking about this on like again from this privilege, and I'm talking about it from this emotional distress and pain, not a physical external reality of something not good happening to me, but I was experiencing this intense emotional pain. One of my biggest lessons is in men with men and relating. Like there's been a lot for me that I've had to clear and get really clear on for myself and all these lessons learned around romance. And this man brought me to I'll use this imagery because this is what comes up. He brought me to the well of my deepest pain, and he forced me to drink. So it reminds me of the moment in Harry Potter where, Dumbledore goes, and this is giving it away. If you haven't read or watched Harry Potter, I don't know what rock you're living under, but like you must get out of that rock and you must. Brilliant, brilliant imagery. But like when Dumbledore takes Harry to get this one Horcrux from Voldemort, right? And he goes, I have to drink all of this, and I don't know what it's going to make me do. I might ask you to kill me. I might ask to be put out of my misery, but I must drink all of it to get this piece of Voldemort so that we can, slay evil, blah, blah, blah. All right. Anyways, Harry Potter. That's another episode somehow down the road. But he gets through it. And at the end, he's totally fine, right? But like this man led me to the well of my deepest pain. He forced me to drink it. And at the other end, I became very clear about, oh, wow, I am worthy of love, even in my most grotesque form, my deepest jealousy, my deepest heartache, my deepest grief, my deepest rage, my monstrous self. And this man, it didn't work out with this man. And thank goddess it didn't for both of us, because it wasn't like we had that level of a contract. That was it. And then the soul contract was complete. But like he witnessed me in that. And he didn't make me wrong, In a way, he loved me unconditionally through that until it was just time to move on. But that's, I think, what we get to experience in our humanness is those very dark moments, however it comes to us, not because we are bad. And that's bringing it back full circle. And maybe that's where this gets to be a really nice closure to this beautiful conversation of what you were speaking to earlier, that our deepest wound collectively is connected to that fall from grace in the Garden of Eden, that we believe that we are unworthy. The divinity and humanity, the crux of it is the darkest moment and the brightest light, and reclaiming the light in the darkest moment, which is to remember that you are worthy of joy, you are worthy of bliss, you are worthy of goodness, and you get to choose it. No one outside of you is going to do it for you. You have to do it, and you do hold the power to do it.
Yeah.
The end. That's it. That's what every great story tells us. To defeat evil, the bad guy, whatever it is, it's not about a bad guy. It's about, wow, the deepest soul-crushing darkness that I am experiencing within, for whatever the reason, irrationally, irreasonably, that has happened to me, will I persevere and choose my joy and my light instead?
Yeah. That's it. The divinity of being human. We hold that much power. We just have to unleash it, unlock it, choose it.
Remember it. We have to remember it.
And know that it doesn't just have to come out through crisis and pain, right?
Yeah.
Is that we get to choose that in our moments of joy.
Always on offer. Exactly. Always worthy.
Beautiful. That feels like the sweetest, most beautiful place to complete.
Yeah, it does. That feels really good. Wow, I had no idea that our journey was going to lead us there. That was really interesting just to experience. Just speaking to that very quickly before we close out, like what a gift to even be able to have this conversation. So thank you for showing up as you did, babe. That was beautiful. That was
Thank
juicy.
you.
We knew it was going to be juicy, and 'twas.
'Twas indeed. Enjoyed this very much. Thank you.
Thank you, my love. Thank you to all who have listened here with us today. Go forth, be free, reclaim your divinity, and Yeah, just remember you are so powerful. So thank you for being present on this journey with us today. Sending you much love and many blessings from Mama Bali.
That's a bless.
Ciao.
Bye.